Good morning or good afternoon, class. Mr. Long here, depending on what period you have me. Today we are getting into the very basics of geography, the intro to geography. And it is really important that we do discuss what geography is all about and the basic concepts, the basic terms. We'll go into a little more detail next week. But this is a world history class, which means we are going to be studying different cultures, different parts of the world in history. So it's really important that we know exactly where we're talking about if we are referring to a map. So some of you guys, this might be review, others it may not, which is perfectly fine. So you guys are responsible for video lectures for a couple things. Number one, you need to really, really listen and pay attention. If for some reason during this video lecture you don't quite understand something, you have two options. You can always pause it, rewind it, re-listen to it, and hopefully you will understand it then. And if not, you still don't understand it, then please raise your hand and I will always come by and I will help you out as much as I possibly can. So in front of you, you will have two handouts. You have a handout for notes that you will be taking on, and then you should have a blank world map handout in front of you. So during this video lecture, you will be filling out both the notes and also you will be labeling and drawing on the map. Once again, please feel free to rewind any part of this video lecture and re-listen if you need to, if you don't quite understand something. So hopefully most of us know a couple things about geography. But if you're looking at your handout in front of you, the first part of the handout, we're basically just going to define three major terms. Geography being the first term that we need to identify or we need to define. So on your notes in front of you, you need to just write down the definitions and then we will move on from there. So geography is a Greek word. It's broken down into two parts. Geo meaning earth, and then of course graphy, which means to write. So writing about the earth. And there is so many different aspects about the earth. And that's going to lead us into geography being broken up into two major types of geography or categories. And that's human geography and that's physical geography. Now, human geography is very interesting. We can most likely tie anything in our history book, anything that we talk about in this history class, to human geography. So it is the study of where and why human activities are located where they are. We're going to talk about different cultures. We're going to talk about why people are a certain way, why they live in certain places, why some people feel like they are superior or better than other people. So the whole idea of racism, we'll talk about that throughout history, especially when we get to the 1930s with the rise of Nazi Germany and Hitler and the Holocaust. And then, of course, we have our second category, which is physical geography. And physical geography is a study of where and why natural forces occur as they do. So we will talk about, in regards to physical geography, where something is located, the mountains, maybe rivers, oceans, continents, and so on. So we could literally tie everything from our world history class into one of these two categories. But once again, it's very, very important that we start off in the very beginning of the year talking about geography, because when we do start talking about history, it will definitely be tied in. So make sure that you write down on your notes these three definitions for the terms of geography, human geography, and physical geography. Moving on. Okay, so I am hoping that everyone knows that there is 7 continents in the world. We have North America, we have South America, we have Europe, Asia, Africa, and of course Antarctica. And then we only have 4 oceans in the world. Now, oceans are way different than seas or rivers or lakes. These are major oceans that are in the world, and there's only 4. We have the Pacific, And if I'm referring to the Pacific Ocean, that is the ocean that's here on the west coast of the United States. So if any of you guys go to like Newport Beach, Huntington Beach, Dana Point, San Clemente, any of our beaches here in California, you guys will be swimming in the Pacific Ocean. Now, say you go on the East Coast, say you are in Virginia or you are in New York, that would be the Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic Ocean separates North America from Europe. Then, of course, we have the Indian Ocean and we have the Arctic Ocean, which is way north and it is very, very cold there. Now, the Indian Ocean, going back to the Indian Ocean, is rather warm. And the Indian Ocean is warm because it is very close to a certain imaginary line. And hopefully, we know that imaginary line would be the equator. The closer you are to the equator, the warmer the climate is. The further away you move from the equator, the colder the climate gets. So you need to fill out the 7 continents on your notes, the 4 ocean on your notes, and then from there, I need you to please turn your attention to the map, the blank map that's in front of you. And I need you to label all 7 continents. I also need you to label all 4 major oceans. Now, I realize that when you're looking at this, you see 2 Pacific Oceans and you see 2 Atlantic Oceans. Well, you got to remember that the world is a sphere. It's like a big, big circle. And it's 360 degrees, which means it wraps around. So the Pacific Ocean will wrap around and meet once again on the other side. And then the reason there's 2 Atlantic Oceans is for you guys to understand that there's a North Atlantic, there's a South Atlantic, which means it's above or below the equator. And same goes for the Pacific, the North Pacific and the South Pacific. So in front of you, your map should be labeled and it should look something like this. But I do want to note something. And this is my fault and I do apologize. I forgot to label Antarctica. So if you're looking at this map, the map that's in front of you, and you don't see Antarctica, let me go back. And of course, Antarctica is at the very, very bottom. Once again, very cold there because it is the furthest away from what? Of course, the equator. So moving on, and listen real quick, everyone. If you need to, and please, you will need to. You need to pause it, and then you will take your notes. You need to pause it, and then you will actually fill out your map. When you're done filling out your notes, when you're done filling out your map, from there, then you will move on to the next section. Very, very basic directions. Sometimes, though, we get confused. Even I get confused sometimes when I'm looking at directions or trying to give directions. Now, the basic directions, north, south, east, and west. And what you see in front of you right here is known as a compass rose. So not only does it have the north, south, east, and west directions, but it also has northwest, northeast, southwest, and southeast. Now, hopefully you guys understand and notice that the northwest, northeast, southwest, and southeast. I want you to focus on those 4 directions. Never ever will you say east or west first. You will always refer to those directions by saying northeast, northwest, or southwest, southeast. And I will come back to that because that's very, very important. So what I want you guys to do now on your map, I want you to add the next part. The bottom right-hand corner, I want you guys to draw a compass rose that looks like what you see on the screen right now. So I want you to draw all 8 directions: north, south, east, west, northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast. And then from there, I want you to underline N, N, S, S. And then I want you guys to please make a side note, just like I did right underneath your compass rose. And I want you to write down north or south always goes first. Please make that note. Okay, so our first major term that we should all be aware of, and I've already mentioned it, is the equator. Now, on your notes in front of you, you need to obviously copy down these 2 bullet points of what the equator is, but I really want you to listen and pay attention. The equator circles the middle of the Earth from east to west. So the red line on the map that you see on the screen is the equator. Okay? It is side to side. It goes side to side. That's the direction it goes in. It's a horizontal line. And if I'm referring to a line that is horizontal or going from side to side, I'm asking you what 2 directions it goes in. It can only go, if it's going side to side, from east to west or west to east. It's not going north or south. It doesn't go that direction because it's not vertical. So the equator also divides the Earth into half spheres, the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. So if I'm saying, okay, well, what hemisphere is the United States in? Well, we should know that the United States, if you guys look at my cursor, my arrow, is above the equator, which means it's in the northern hemisphere. If I ask you, okay, what hemisphere is Australia in? That, of course, would be the southern hemisphere because it is below the equator. You also need to know that the equator is located at 0 degrees latitude, and I will explain that later on in this video lecture. But on your map, you should see a bunch of numbers and degrees running on the left-hand side, going up and down. And then at the very top, you should see some numbers with degrees also, but we'll get to there. So what I need you guys to do, besides writing these 2 bullet point notes on your handout, I now need you to turn your attention to your map, and we're adding step number 3. I need you to please take a color highlighter, whatever color highlighter you choose. It does not have to be pink like mine. And I need you to draw in or highlight the equator, please. I also need you to label on that highlight equator. Now talking about our next major important concept, which is the prime meridian. Now the prime meridian is perpendicular to the equator. It goes up and down. It is a vertical line. So if I were to ask you what direction is the prime meridian going, what 2 directions could the prime meridian go in? If it's going up and down, then that means it can only go north to south or south to north. Very important. The prime meridian also divides the Earth into 2 hemispheres, the western hemisphere and the eastern hemisphere. So if you guys take a look at the screen, take a look at the cursor right now, if I'm over here and I ask you what hemisphere is the United States in, it's to the left of the prime meridian, which is this line going down the middle, which means if it's going to the left, that would be the western hemisphere. If I asked you guys what hemisphere is Asia in, that would be the eastern hemisphere because it is to the right of the prime meridian. Now the prime meridian is located at 0 degrees longitude, and I will explain what latitude and longitude is later on in this video lecture, but you just need to know it is at 0 degrees longitude. You also need to know that the prime meridian runs through Greenwich, England, and I will come back to that in the next slide. You just need to know that the prime meridian runs through Greenwich, England. That is the starting point. And that's important when we start talking about time zones. Now, they created the prime meridian in 1884 for ships, so that ships could know how far east or west their home countries were. So it was all about navigation and how to get from one place to the other. So once again, the prime meridian, just like the equator, is an imaginary line. You can't physically go to the equator or prime meridian and see it with your own eyes. It's imaginary, okay? But it's there. So what I need you guys to do now is I need you to please take a different color highlighter and I need you to highlight the prime meridian, and I also need you to label the prime meridian just like I did on my map. Now the second step that I want you to do with your map, and if you guys notice, there are several different arrows that are in red. They're smaller, red arrows. What we're going to do is we are going to turn our entire map into one giant compass rose like we did on the bottom right hand corner. So if you guys notice, okay, look at the cursor at the very, very top, you're going to write N for north. At the very bottom, you're going to write S for south. On the left-hand side, W for west. Right-hand side, E for east. And then you are going to fill in those four other directions: northeast, northwest, southwest, southeast. Very, very important that you guys do that, because if you do that, it's going to make it very, very easy to calculate and to find latitude and longitude, which we are going to do a little bit later in this video lecture. So please make sure that your map looks identical to the map that you see on the screen. Of course, though, excuse me, you do not have to draw in those red arrows. Those red arrows are meant to just get your attention so you know exactly what you need to be filling in on your map. Okay, so it's really important when we talk about time zones that we know what the prime meridian is. Excuse me. Sorry about that. The Earth is a sphere made up of 360 degrees. So when I say sphere, everyone, I am referring to like a circle. Okay? And hopefully you know, if you're sitting in your math class, make your math teachers happy. We should know that a circle is 360 degrees. Now, every 15 degrees makes up one time zone. So I got to do a little bit of math here, and that's okay because I'm going to do this for you. I just need you to really pay attention so you understand this. You are going to take the total number of degrees of a sphere or a circle, which is 360. You're going to divide 360 by 15 because that is the number of degrees per time zone. And that will equal 24 different time zones. Also, 24 hours in a day. That's how we get that number, 24 hours. You divide 360 by 15, you get 24. There's 24 different time zones in the world, and there's also 24 hours in a day. So that whole idea of Greenwich, England, is very important because that is where it starts. That is the reference point. So if you go to the left of Greenwich or to the west of Greenwich, you will lose time. If you go to the east of Greenwich, you will gain an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or however many hours, depending on whatever time zone that you are in. So once again, moving east, you add 1 hour per 15 degrees. Moving west, you subtract 1 hour per 15 degrees. So make sure that you write down all these bullet points on your notes. Now, to give you a little bit of a visual, this is obviously a different type of map that we're looking at. But if you look on the screen, right-hand side, my cursor right here, the arrow, this is the prime meridian. This is where the reference point is. This is where it all starts. This is 0 degrees longitude. Now, if you go to the left of the prime meridian, you are losing time. If you go to the right of the prime meridian, you are gaining time. So if I am right here and I say want to find out what time it is in Rome, which is to the right, I will gain an hour. Now, if I am at the prime meridian and I want to know, which is in, once again, Greenwich, England, and I want to know what time it is here in California, we should know that California is Pacific time zone, which means if it's 7 p.m., it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours earlier on the west coast of the United States here in California, which means it is 11 a.m. Here in the U.S., we have 4 time zones. We have the Eastern time zone, the Central time zone, the Mountain time zone, and the Pacific time zone. So this is how we get 24 hours a day, and this is how we get different time zones throughout parts of the world. We've already mentioned what a hemisphere is. Hemispheres are half spheres, and there is a total of 4 hemispheres in the world: northern, southern, western, and eastern. So I need you to fill in this point, and then I need you to reference beneath that the 4 circles that make up the spheres. And I need you to please shade in the correct part of the circle that makes up the hemisphere. So if you are looking at Western and Eastern Hemisphere, you better draw in that prime meridian. And then you need to shade in the correct side. If you're looking at Northern or Southern Hemisphere, you need to draw in that equator and, of course, shade in the correct part, if that's north above or south below. Very, very important that you understand that. And once again, guys, at any point in this video lecture you are confused, you don't understand, and you stopped it and paused it and rewind it and listen to it again, you still don't understand, then I need you to please raise your hand so I can help you out. Okay, so latitude. Now I need you to write all these points down on your notes, but I need you to really pay attention to this also. Latitude are lines that are parallel to the equator, and they circle the Earth in directions from west to east. So going back to math class, we're going to kind of do a little bit of math here. If a line is parallel to another line, that means it will never, ever intersect or run into each other. They are equal distance apart from each other. So remember, the equator runs side to side. It's a horizontal line, which means latitude lines go above the equator and they go below the equator. But they are also horizontal lines that run from east to west, and they are parallel to the equator, which means they also run in the same direction of east and west, just like the equator. The latitude lines start at 0 degrees and it goes all the way up to 90 degrees. And it can go north of the equator, or it can go 0 to 90 degrees south of the equator, just depending on what part of the world that we are looking at. The North Pole is 90 degrees north latitude. The South Pole is 90 degrees south latitude. And remember, everyone, North and South Pole are super, super, super cold because they are very far away from what? Hopefully remember, the equator. The closer you are to the equator, the warmer it is. The further away you are from the equator, the colder it gets. So now let's take a look at your map. And we got to add a few things to our map. And your map, when we're done with this slide, needs to look identical to the map that you see on the screen right now. So what I need you to do is I need you to grab a third, let's not do this yet. Let's write the side notes and then we will grab a third color highlighter. I need you to look and I need you to make a few additions to our map. Let's start out at the very, very top. If you guys are looking at the screen right now, looking at my cursor, okay, or the arrow, at the very corner, you should see the number 180 degrees. What I want you to do is I want you to draw an arrow to that corner, and then right above that arrow, I want you to write 90 degrees N, which stands for north, and then in parentheses, I want you to write LAT, which is an abbreviation for lat, which is latitude. Then I want you to focus at the very, very bottom in the corner, and I want you to write down 90 degrees south, and then parentheses, LAT, once again standing for latitude. Now those numbers aren't on your map, but you need to know that latitude goes from 0 to 90. Next step, what I need you to do is I need you to make a side note on the corner left-hand side at the bottom. I want you to write down first dash latitude in parentheses north or south. This will make more sense when I explain how to calculate latitude and longitude. I just need you to copy this down, and I need your map to look exactly like my map. From there, I need you to, right above where you filled in southwest, I need you to write down south latitude. Right above south latitude, please write down first. Then I need you to write down between west and northwest, north latitude, and first right above north latitude. And then hopefully you guys understand how to write this with all of those red arrows. Remember, guys, those red arrows are just reference arrows. Please don't draw those arrows in. It's just meant to help you know what you need to fill in on this particular part of the map. So now what I need everyone to do is grab a third color highlighter. And I need you to highlight, just like I did in yellow on the screen that you see, the N for north on both of them, the S for south on both of them. I need you to also highlight the side note that we made on the bottom left-hand corner, the side note that we made on the bottom right-hand corner underneath the compass rose, and then, of course, the two side notes that say north latitude first and then south latitude first. So your map at this point should look identical to the map that's on the screen that you're looking at. Okay, so here's a visual. At the very bottom of your notes, you should see latitude, a box with a circle in it, and then it says basically fill in the latitude lines. I already drew in for you the equator, so I need you to draw 2 or 3 parallel lines above or north of the equator and 2 or 3 latitude lines below or south of the equator. When I say latitude, what I want you or everyone to think of is a ladder. And you go up the ladder, you are going north of the equator. If you are going down the ladder, you are going south of the equator. So kind of an easier way to remember it just in case you get confused. So latitude, just think ladder, going up and then going down. Okay, longitude. So once again, I need you to please fill in the notes for these 4 bullet points, and then I will explain exactly what longitude is, but it's almost the complete, actually, it is the complete opposite of latitude. Longitude are lines that run in the direction from the North Pole to the South Pole. Lines are measured from east to west, starting at the prime meridian. Okay, so this is where it gets very, very confusing. People get confused when we start talking about direction and how latitude and longitude lines are measured. So longitude lines are not parallel to the prime meridian. They are vertical lines. They go up and down, but they start at the North Pole or the South Pole and they work their way up or they work their way down. So they either go from the North Pole to the South Pole or the South Pole to the North Pole. And they are not parallel, which means they eventually what? Run into each other. So instead of straight lines, if you were to draw this out, and I actually want you to draw out longitude lines on that second circle at the very bottom of your notes that you're filling in, your longitude lines almost are going to make that circle look like a pumpkin. They curve. They start at the very top and they all curve down, so it almost looks like a football. So if I'm asking you the direction of those longitude lines, they're going up and down still, which means if something goes up, it's north. If something goes down, it's south. But if you're looking at those longitude lines and now you're looking at the prime meridian, and I ask you, how do you measure longitude lines? Those longitude lines are either to the right of the prime meridian, which means they're to the east, or they are to the left of the prime meridian, which means they are to the west. Okay, so it's very important. And when I go over the example of how to calculate absolute location, it will become very, very easy to understand this. Longitude lines are different than latitude lines. They go from 0 degrees all the way to 180 degrees. So they actually double the number of latitude lines. So once again, here's an example. I want you to fill in. I want you to draw in, please, 2 or 3 longitude lines to the east of the prime meridian, and then 2 or 3 longitude lines to the west of the prime meridian. And once again, it almost looks like a pumpkin. Okay, so at this point now, we got to fill in a couple more side notes, and then we need to make some more highlights with our 4th color highlighter. So what I want everyone to do first, I want you to take a look at the very top of your map. I want you to take your pen or pencil, and at the very top to the west or to the left of the prime meridian, which is my green line, I want you to write west longitude, and I want you to write 2nd above it. Then to the right or the east of the prime meridian, my green line, I want you to write, please, east longitude and 2nd above it. From there, I want you to please focus on the bottom left. And I want you to write down 2nd dash longitude in parentheses, west or east. And underneath that, I want you to please write down your 3rd side note or point. And that will read how latitude and longitude are measured. And then underline a bunch of times or even highlight measured or even box it in. Now from there, I want you to take your 4th color highlighter. For my example that you're looking at on the screen, I used orange. And I want you to highlight in your 4th color highlighter everything that you see highlighted in orange, please. So at the end of this slide, your map needs to look exactly the way my map looks like, including all of the highlights. Once again, don't worry about those reference arrows that are in red. Okay, so here comes the toughest part out of this entire video lecture, but hopefully I can explain it so you understand it and it's a little bit easier. So how to calculate absolute location on a map. So whenever I say absolute location, I will always refer to latitude and longitude. It's the exact point on the map of where a location is. So you need to fill these points in on your notes. Latitude. Latitude can only be measured in north or south. They cannot be measured in any other way. Latitude always goes first, no matter what. Latitude always goes first, no matter what, just like north and south will always go first, no matter what. You will never ever say west-north. If you're referring to a direction, you will always say the northwest or the southwest. So that's very, very important. Right here, if you're looking at my arrow, my cursor, this is how you would write out an absolute location of a point on a map. You will write the degree first, followed by the actual direction, comma, this right here, 60 degrees south, would be the latitude. Then, of course, we'd have to find the longitude, which is 135 degrees west. So longitude can only be measured in east or west. Longitude always goes second, no matter what. Very important. We all understand that. Okay, so now we are going to find 2 absolute locations on a map. Now, what I need you guys to all recognize is we will find the location of where the actual arrow is pointing. Not where the circle is at, but where the arrow is pointing. So if you're looking at the cursor of the arrow on my computer, that is where we are finding the point right here. Okay. Okay, everyone. So what we are going to do next is we're actually going to find, if you notice at the last part of your notes, there's two boxes. The first box on the left is number 1 through 15, and the box on the right is number 1 through 10, excuse me. And from there, we are going to calculate absolute locations of different points on the map. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to write down, or excuse me, you will see 15 points. And if you notice, there is a circle, yellow circle with a number in the middle of that circle. You are going to find the location of the point where the arrow is pointing. So if you take a look at the screen where my cursor is circling, you are finding the location of where the arrow is pointing. If you're looking at number 2, which is on the bottom right hand side, you are going to find this location where the arrow is pointing. Next slide. So this is questions 1 through 15. And the next slide, you will fill in the box points 1 through 10, but there's no arrows for points 1 through 10 at all, but you still have to find the location for latitude and longitude. So for right here, they're pretty straightforward because they're either on a line or in the middle of two lines. So you're going to calculate, find the absolute location. Remember, you need to have the number in degrees followed by the direction, north or south, because latitude always goes first, comma, the number in degrees followed by the direction in longitude, which is always going to be either east or west. So what I need you guys to do is I need you to actually exit out of this video lecture for now. And I want you to, I uploaded two other very short video clips. And these two short video clips will break down how to find and calculate latitude and longitude in two different ways. So once again, we are going to stop this video. You are going to watch video number 1, and then you will watch video number 2. And when you are done with both of those videos, you will go back to this video lecture and you will locate in the first map the 15 points, and on the second map these 10 points that you see right now. And if you have any questions, once again, please raise your hand.